And tonight, the Biden administration is working to figure out exactly what kind of government will take root in Syria. It's been more than 24 hours since rebels overthrew the country's dictator. So let's talk about that and more. Lester Munson from the National Security Institute at George Mason's up late with me tonight here on the Final Five. Lester, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, this moved at such a breakneck speed, and it caught a lot of people off guard when we realized the end of the Assad regime was over just like that.
Right, and I think as soon as we figured out who was up to this, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the militia, people started immediately Googling them. Who are they? Where did they come from? What kind of government are they going to likely pursue here in Syria? Really, there's even now, a couple of days later, a lot of mysteries remain about exactly who they are and how they did this and what the future is going to hold for Syria.
In terms of that group there, I've heard a lot about them insofar as that they were at one point more aligned with the likes of some of these extremist groups. They've been trying to distance themselves in recent years. How do you do that?
Well, they were this group, HTS for short, is kind of the recreation of a group called the Al-Nusra Front, which was an affiliate of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, of course, was responsible for the 9/11 attacks 23 years ago, and there's an existing in law. Congress passed an authorization for the use of military force against Al-Qaeda or any other group associated with it. So, in some ways, the U.S. is technically at war with this militia. However, the leader, Abu Muhammad, he goes by, that's his nom de guerre, as they say. He may change that as he becomes more of a legitimate politician. He's indicated that he's going to tolerate diversity. He's said that he would allow Christians to celebrate Christmas and things like that. So this may be a different approach than the normal kind of what we think of as an Al-Qaeda affiliate, which is a hardcore terrorist organization. There may be some opportunities here for a different kind of future for Syria.
In terms of how the U.S. reacts to this, over the weekend, President Biden called it an opportunity for the Syrian people. Former President, now President-elect Trump, had said he doesn't want to see the U.S. getting involved with another conflict, another nation build, so to speak here. This is happening at such a crucial time in the U.S. where we're between administrations. So do we have any sense of what the U.S. role might be moving ahead with this?
Well, what the U.S. policy is in 3 months could be very different than what it is today, as you kind of alluded. Let's remember, there are Americans in Syria. We have boots on the ground. 900 at least American servicemen and women are in eastern Syria to prevent the rise of ISIS again. So the U.S. has military interest there. The question is, will incoming President Trump want to continue that mission? Will he want to recast the mission, or will he want to withdraw entirely? He's kind of kept all of his cards close to his vest here. No one really knows what he's going to do. He wants to keep his options open, I presume. But the policy that we see today under President Biden could be very different in just 2 or 3 months.
And one of the figures that President-elect Trump wants to bring into the fold is Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence. A lot has been made about her interactions with Bashar al-Assad through the years. That will very much undoubtedly likely come up during her confirmation hearing. So does that give us any insight, or is that still, as you said, sort of a wild card?
I think it's still a wild card. I don't know what her strategy is going to be to try and get to win confirmation in the Senate. I don't know what she's going to be telling senators behind closed doors and in her hearing, but likely she's going to try to avoid some of these questions about Bashar Assad, who really was a terrible, terrible person, an awful dictator who killed hundreds of thousands of people and also pushed millions of others into refugee status. Yeah. So she is going to have some tough questions, there's no doubt, but it's a different world for Syria. Assad is gone. He's likely in Russia somewhere, perhaps with his roommate Edward Snowden. We don't really know, but she's going to have some tough questions, and if she can answer them, then she'll get confirmed.
Do we read anything into that alliance between Assad and Putin at this point?
Well, Russia and Iran were the big backers of Assad. Turkey was the big opponent of Assad. So in Syria, all of the powers were there. The U.S. was there, Iran was there, Russia, Turkey. Turkey probably the big winner here. Russia and Iran are the big losers. We'll see how this shakes out for the United States and Israel. Maybe more of a lateral move for them than up or down. But the fact that he went to Russia, I think, shows that Russia was indeed his biggest backer.
Yeah, well, the Middle East remains a tinderbox, and if there's one thing constant, it's change. Lester Munson, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate the insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.